Welcome to the Ancient Coin Podcast with Aaron Berk, a show about ancient coins from the viewpoint of a seasoned professional with nearly 30 years' experience. Here's Aaron Berk and Mike Nodelman on the Ancient Coin Podcast.
And the sound of the gong means it is once again time for the Ancient Coin Podcast. I'm Mike Nodelman.
Aaron Berk.
There you go. And we have a loaded show for you tonight. So we're going to break our mold and kind of step out of our comfort zone. We have an interview tonight, and we can hardly wait to bring that to you. So we have David Hendin is going to come and talk to us about his Guide to Biblical Coins 6th edition, as well as we're going to talk about some of the auction news. We have a doofus purchase for you, and as always, a pearl of wisdom for our necklace. So, Aaron, why don't we jump right in and get started with the auction scene?
Yeah, so, this is we're headed into our spring auctions, and so they are beginning. And there's a couple that I want to focus on right now, but there's a lot more coming. The first one, I'm not going to spend a ton of time here because we have a really exciting interview with David coming up.
Action-packed.
So the first one is the Gorney and Mosh sale. That's actually going to be happening this Monday, March 7th. And it has its slew of excellent coins again. 1,182 lots in this sale. And pretty much something for everyone. I've always liked Gorney and Mosh. I think it's a great auction house. They're out of Munich. The only problem is that the auction starts early. It's going to start at like 6 a.m. Chicago time.
Yeah, so they're
that's
6 hours
fun.
ahead?
Yes, or a little bit more.
Wow.
Yeah, during the winter, I think it's a little bit more.
Yeesh.
So that's always interesting. But again, I would check it out. There's always something to be seen here. They've got a great Greek section, excellent Celtic section, as well as all the Roman and Republican and Imperatorial that you'd expect to find from a Gorney and Mosh sale. So the next one is going to be the Roma sale. Theirs are going to be happening March 24th and 25th, so it's more the end of the month. And they've got 1,206 lots of ancient coins.
2 days.
And again, what's that?
2 days of auctions.
2 days of auctions. So most of the ancient coins, quite a few of them, most of the Greek is going to be on the 24th, and then the day 2 is going to be more of the Roman material. They start a little bit later in the afternoon, so it's a little bit more user-friendly for us on this side of the pond. But again, a lot of great coins in here, something for everybody. And again, these aren't going to be like your traditional e-sales. It's going to have a little bit higher quality coinage, and expect the prices to be strong. Plus, don't forget, you always have to watch the currencies that you're bidding in. So first we were looking at Gorney and Mosh, that was in euros. Now we're looking at British pounds in Roma. So when you're looking at these things, you're not going to just look at their buyer's fees, which I think both of them are 20%. In this particular case, but you have the British pound, which is probably over $1.30, and you have the pound, which is probably about $1.16 or something like that.
So
So
there's some really, really nice detailed pieces in this Roma sale, and they have some very nice, pretty detailed price tags to go with them. So, it just amazes me that even some of the stuff with maybe what I would consider to be lesser art is still looking at like 1,500 pounds. It's like $1,800. That's a lot of money.
Yeah,
and the buyer's fee on top of it.
The 20% on top of it. So, the thing is that no matter what area of ancient coins you're looking at, there are always going to be rarities. And when those rarities come up, even though they may look crude or unusual to you and not worth what you think they might be worth,
Sure.
There's always going to be people out there who are longing for those pieces because that's their area that they collect. And remember, in any auction, all you need is 2 bidders to make a price go high.
That's it.
So
as we prove
as long as you have enough,
as we prove every single episode.
Every single episode. So there are a lot of e-sales out there as normal. I'm not going to touch on all of them. The Kunker sale is going to be coming up later. We'll probably hit that in a later segment. NAC is still coming up. Their sales usually going to probably be in May, I would imagine, something like that. But we'll hit on those as we hit future shows. But those are the two that I picked out. And so, as always, since you guys all love the doofus purchases, I kind of had to go back and look for one. And one that really caught my eye happened back in January at the New York show. It was at the Heritage Auction. And it was a very typical Athens tetragram. This is not a rare coin. And it's part of a larger group that has been on the market. We've talked about that. This is maybe a $1,500 coin at most. Maybe you can ask $1,800 for it, but because I got that star designation 5 out of 5 from NGC, it brought $5,500. It's not worth that, guys. And I mean, even if it was a rare die, I would see, that would make it more unusual. This is about as typical as it gets. I'm not sure why it got the star designation, because NGC loves to put the fact that there are splits on coins, and this has 2 splits, one at the nose and one at the base there. So why is this a star coin? I don't understand.
And we're not talking about a tiny split either. So Heritage has these really nice big pictures, and I have one of them on screen right now. And I mean, there's no missing it. It's huge. At 3 o'clock right there at the nose.
Right. And so this isn't even the best Athens type for this, this period. I mean, you can get ones that look nicer than this. You can get one. How about one with a full crest? To me, there's so much better quality out there, and somebody strictly bought this for the star. And to me, that is a major doofus purchase.
Yeah, what they did was they let the plastic do the talking instead of the coin.
And again, I don't have a problem when coins have stars that really deserve stars. This didn't deserve a star. Didn't deserve one. I don't care what anybody tells me. This did not deserve a star. So the fact is that when you get a coin that gets a star designation when it shouldn't, and somebody pays this kind of price tag for it based on that, that's a big problem.
Yeah, and it's not like you can point it out. So it's like, even if you were to go anti-Albanese and put a sticker on it with a big thumbs down, just peel that right off and go sell the coin.
Right. And typically the market decides. The market decides what coins are worth generally. But here's a situation where the market is skewed based on the ignorance of people not knowing what they're buying. And so that's a major problem in my book, and it should be in your book too.
Yeah, it's a very popular coin. It's probably the most, popular design out there. I mean, it's everywhere, right?
There you go.
And yet, we
didn't plan that, by the way.
No, that was just totally by, but, and yet, you can find good examples of it. You can find not so good examples.
Right. So, now, we're going to talk to David Hendon, and his new book is fantastic, and look forward to bringing that to you.
And in our educational segment tonight on the Ancient Coin Podcast, we bring you our first interview. So tonight's guest is, his name is David Hendon. He is the author of A Guide to Biblical Coins. The current 6th edition is available now at not only Amazon.com, but most of your local coin dealers, as well as our website at hjbltd.com. But more importantly, if you go to numismatics.org, which is the ANS website, there is a 30% discount if you purchase it there. And we want to welcome David Hendon to the Ancient Coin Podcast. Welcome, David.
Hey, thanks, Mike. I just want to say that you better watch out. There's only a 30% discount if you're a member of the ANS if you purchase it there. So
okay.
Just to make it clear, yeah, no problem.
Yeah, no, I don't want to write checks that the ANS has to cash.
There you go.
So, David, I've had, just a real short time to look at your book. My first impression of it was looking at what was covered in it. And I was wondering how you came about the exact, what's the word I want to use? The parameters that you use for what it is that's covered in the book. How did you narrow it down to exactly what it is that you do?
Sure. Well, I'll tell you what, it's the sixth edition, and each edition has covered slightly different territory, although the principal area that I write about are the coins of the ancient Holy Land between the Persian period and the end of the Bar Kokhba War. There are some other coins that are from slightly different periods and places that I discuss in various contexts, but mainly it's the coins from the area that we know as the Holy Land. That's ancient Judea, Samaria, Transjordan. These are the areas where the activity between the Old Testament, the return of the Jews from captivity back to the ancient land of Israel, going through the Jewish wars and the end of the ancient Jewish state, which basically ended early in the 2nd century. And it's that period. And that is the period that we know of as the biblical period, especially leading up to the New Testament. That's the time of Rabbinic Judaism, the rise of Jesus as a rabbi with some of his own ideas, his death, and then his followers following in a new tradition that came from the previous traditions and evolved forward. And there was a whole discussion to be had about the first appearance of Christianity on coins. I don't really cover that. That is a later period than the quote unquote biblical coin period. And in fact, Mike, I even have a little a few pages in here with the question, what are biblical coins, and how, what are they, and indeed, how do we draw a circle around the group? And there's a little give and take.
I promise I didn't steal that idea.
Yep.
So, David, so this is Aaron. I guess I want to back up for a second. And, most people know who you are, but for the people who don't, you've got a pretty storied career. I've known you my whole career, which is 30 years, and I've known you since I was a kid.
Yes, you have.
My father for probably 50 years or so.
Close.
But you've been a publisher in a previous life. Do you want to just kind of give a background of, kind of your career?
How I got here? Well, so I went to graduate school in journalism at the University of Missouri Journalism School. But actually, the year that I graduated from undergraduate college was 1967. And in 1967, you won't remember, but your history books will tell you that was when the Six-Day War took place in Israel. And actually, the real backstory is that my dad tried to volunteer, and he was a physician in St. Louis. And the Israeli embassy said, "Thank you very much, Dr. Hendon, but the last thing we need is a middle-aged internist. If you have any friends who are plastic surgeons or orthopedic doctors, tell them to call us. We need them right away." So my dad called me very frustrated, and it was literally the middle of my final week, and he said, they told me they're looking for younger people, though. Maybe you could volunteer. So I went over to the journalism school, and I got my acceptance postponed for a year, and graduated college, and literally within a month, packed up and went to Israel as a volunteer for a year. While I was there, I totally became fascinated with archaeology, ancient history, and Jewish and Judean coins. I came back. I went to a finished graduate school, and I came to work as a journalist here in New York for the Scripps Howard Company, which owned several newspaper syndicates. And I was a columnist and a writer, and like many columnists and writers that are fairly good at their job. I got tricked into management, and spent my career, managing those companies. And one of the companies that I did manage was the World Almanac and Book of Facts, and that's what Aaron's talking about. We had a first printing every year of 1.1 million copies, and we were on the New York Times bestseller list within a week of publication for years. So I did that, and I ran the newspaper syndicate. And those of you who know me or see me on Facebook know that I repost a lot of editorial cartoons. I worked with a lot of editorial cartoonists and a lot of strip cartoonists, including Charles Schultz, including Jim Davis, who does Garfield, and I'm currently still working with Lincoln Purse, who does the Big Nate comic strip. And some of you who are listening will know that Big Nate is now also appearing for streaming on Paramount Plus network, and will also soon be appearing on Nickelodeon as well. So that's what I do that doesn't have to do with coins. But for all those years, for those 55 years, I would guess that in spite of the full-time jobs that I have, I don't think I ever spent less than 40 hours a week working on coins just on the evenings and weekends, because they're so interesting. Is that enough, Aaron?
Well, yeah, and now you're the vice president of the ANS as well?
I am. I'm the first vice president of the American Numismatic Society, and I actually am now an honorary curator. I used to be an adjunct curator, but I think I got kicked upstairs, and now I'm an honorary curator. And I still do research on coins. I still represent a couple of my clients, and it's still just as much fun as it used to be.
Right. What, with all the times you've gone back and forth from Israel, and all of the things you've seen in your career, what do you think is the biggest changes you've seen in ancient numismatics?
Well, a couple of things. I think that, first of all, when I first started, when I first lived in Israel and then came back here and started working and was going back to Israel, there was no internet. There were no cell phones. There were no cell phones. There were no iPhones. There weren't even any flip phones. And so if you were a person or a company that was an expert in ancient coins, you depended on going to coin shows, meeting your contacts in your own travels, but there was no internet. If I wanted to buy a tire shekel, I couldn't do. There was no easy research to go on to Vcoins or to your website or to Coin Archives. I couldn't do any research unless I took paper catalogs, which all of us from the old days have literally scores of shelves of paper catalogs, and we used to look through them and see what coins were worth. And everybody had to be their own expert because you couldn't really consult with people as easily as you can today. I would say that's the biggest change.
And let me break that down for the average person. So what you're talking about doing is you're going back to research a coin. You have to figure out where it's sold, go back to that auction, look up the description to it, find the lot number, then go to the prices realized, find that sheet, which got mailed separately from the catalog, and look it up.
That's sad but true.
Yeah.
That's sad but true. That's the way it works. Now, of course, if it was somebody like me, I knew, I subscribed or I received catalogs. I received Aaron Berk's catalog. I received CNG's catalog. I received Joe Malter's catalog in the old days. I received the catalogs, and the overseas ones, from Bank Loy when it was owned by the bank and not the current owners, and all these other wonderful catalogs. And I kept them in order on my shelves, and I tried to get those little pieces of paper that came with the prices realized. But, half the time I couldn't find it, and I would have to call somebody else. And sometimes I had notes in my catalogs, and sometimes I didn't. It was a lot more of a process. There's no doubt about it.
it's crazy now. I mean, even now, we'll keep a lot of the major auction catalogs, but a lot of them we just, when it's over because you can find everything online. You don't even need to keep everything unless it's a really important sale.
Absolutely. It's I mean, I have already divested, and when I say divested, I really haven't sold. I've probably given away to people at least eight long shelves of catalogs, and I probably have 6 or 8 left that I keep treasuring and thinking that I may use. Sorry,
we're running out of space at HJB.
Yeah, for sure. Well, heck, with 6 editions of my book, I don't even have enough room for all my editions on the same shelf.
Right. And then going back to Israel, times were different when you started, and that's true all over the world. But Israel's always had a good treasure trove law, like the UK. Do you think, I know Israel has gone through some trouble after the whole Hobby Lobby debacle. So where do you see that as far as exporting out of Israel these days?
So technically, the Israeli law is not like a treasure trove law, but what Israel does have is they have a procedure to license dealers who sell ancient pieces, whether they're ancient pieces of art or pottery or coins. You have to have a license from the Israeli government, and you have to have from the Israeli Antiquities Authority. Now, when I first started going to Israel in the late 1960s and into the early 1970s, they did not have that law, and you could simply buy and get a receipt and export it and declare it when you got home, and nobody said anything. Starting in the late 70s, Israel changed its laws so that anybody who exports coins must buy them from a licensed dealer and must clear each export through the Israel Antiquities Authority. Now, these days, a great deal of that is computerized, and the inventories of most of the licensed dealers in Israel are on a computer database. So if you buy a coin from a licensed dealer in Israel, they will send an email to the Antiquities Authority and refer to the coin number in their inventory, and the Antiquities Authority will check it and either approve it or not approve it for export. I think some listeners have seen Israeli catalogs, and sometimes it says at the bottom of the description, cannot be exported. But most coins that come from old collections or that have been in the market can be legally exported, and all I can recommend is that all collectors and all dealers should work with licensed dealers in Israel or purchase coins that have been bought and sold legally. And by the way, I mean, Aaron knows this. It's strongly in the interest of ancient coin dealers to do everything right, because otherwise the market may go away, and nobody wants the market in ancient coins to go away. Everybody wants the market in ancient coins to be above board and legal according to the countries that export the coins or where the coins have been residing for sometimes hundreds of years.
Yeah, it's too bad that the rest of the source countries don't kind of follow some of the same procedures that Israel does.
Well, I mean, I am so sold on the portable antiquity scheme in England that if you look at archaeological information on coins, for example, from England over the last 20 or 30 years, there is all kinds of information available, because what happens, I don't know every detail of treasure trove, but when coins are found, they get reported. And some of the ownership goes to the person whose property the coins were found on. Some of the ownership goes to the finders, and some of the ownership remains with the country. And what the country gets out of this, in addition to having the first shot to get the coins into the National Museum, the British Museum, the country also gets the information about where these coins are found, which gives us lots and lots of circulation information. In Israel, in Jordan, in Lebanon, in Syria, people don't have any initiative to report where they have found things. And, by definition, when you find ancient coins in a place, it's a place of archaeological interest. But it may not be an actual archaeological site. It may be a place where some guy got shot and fell off his horse and his money bag rotted along with his body. Or it could be the place where an ancient market was, or a crossroads where people lost money, forgot money, hid money, dropped money. But it's in the interest of knowledge to have all that information reported, however small.
Yeah. Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of this stuff is not being, reported because you have people who don't follow the rules finding material and then taking it out of the countries illegally. So a lot of stuff is being lost.
That's why we can't have nice things.
What's
Sorry, Mike?
I said that's why we can't have nice things.
Yeah, the thing is, you can imagine the situation from native people who live in a place like Jericho or near Jericho, and they have a farm there, and they go out into their backyard and they plow their farm and they find a few coins. And they say, oh, these must be mine. I found them while I plowed my field. And the government is saying, well, wait a minute, not so fast. But something like the portable antiquity scheme gives kind of a structure to all this. I'm quite shocked and surprised that more countries haven't adopted the system. And I'm still hoping they do. And by the way, just as an aside, I believe there are nearly 100 archaeologists who are employed in Great Britain working for the portable antiquity scheme, which, it's a great way for archaeologists to get experience and to learn about the material that's found in their native country.
very counterproductive for the countries not to do this because, going after the collectors and as far as what we can bring in and out of the countries isn't the way to handle it. You have to fix it at the source. And until they do that, I don't see anything changing.
I think that every country has its own problem, and I completely agree that the first laws that have to be obeyed are the laws of the source countries. And the truth is that there are a large number of these source countries that have so much corruption, bribery, smuggling. Not that there's not any corruption in the West. There's plenty of corruption to go around, but it's very, very difficult, and it's not very black and white. I'll just leave this conversation to say that I'm very much in favor of following the laws of each source country, and I'm also very much in favor of each source country getting its act in order. But unfortunately, that's their business.
Right. All right. Well, let's back up a bit. So your first edition of Guide to Biblical Coins came out in 1987, which was actually the year I graduated high school. Yay!
No, sorry. It was in 1977, I think.
77? Oh, I thought it was.
Yes,
87.
and no. You know what? I'll tell you what, though. It's a good story. So the original book was published with a red cover, and it was called Guide to Ancient Jewish Coins.
Got it.
And that was technically the first edition. It was published by Attic Books, which in those days was owned by Alex Malloy. Eventually, they changed their business. The book went out of print. I continued doing a considerably larger amount of research in work in Israel. And so it was subsequently, when I got ready to do another edition, a lot of people said to me, well, you shouldn't really call it ancient Jewish coins because it's so much broader than that. Why don't you call it a Guide to Biblical Coins? So when Guide to Biblical Coins first came out with that title, and it was the one with the blue cover, it did say inside of the book that it was a first edition. That was actually a typographical error. It should have been the second edition and then mentioned the name of the earlier book. I corrected that on the following edition, which was the third edition. So you'll never actually technically find a second edition.
That's a rare
because
book.
that's the first edition with the blue cover. So that's how that got messed up. But I did after.
Basically, the biggest changes between then and now is just the size and scope of the book and a much more broader subject matter, as well as a lot of new discoveries that have come on the market over that time.
What I've tried to do is stay, as you know, Aaron, and as your dad knows, what I've really done for the last 55 years is stay in really close touch with researchers and students of these coins, not only in Israel, but in Jordan, in Lebanon, in Egypt, and in Europe, and people who are doing research in these coins. And I've tried to stay on top of all the research, and I myself have published, I think it's close to 80 papers in referee journals or as book chapters. That's been my own research, and my teachers have been, the greatest scholars from the previous generation: Yaakov Mesher, Dan Barag, Shraga Kedar, Ala Kushner Stein. Those are the people who, sort of led me into this, taught me things, and then I sort of went on and did my own research, sometimes in collaboration, sometimes on my own. What this book is, I think, is kind of it's a guidebook, and it's meant to be a kind of a textbook. It's not only my ideas. What I've done is I've done the research of all of the research that's been done that, in my opinion, is credible and high-level stuff, and I've used it to incorporate the narrative as I discuss it in Guide to Biblical Coins. And by the way, we start with a little bit of information about collecting coins, but then I have a chapter which is one of my favorites about how people bought and sold things before coins were even invented. You talking about the scale weights and silver and gold as currency, the metal currency, and how it evolved and when it became money, and how money went, how the use of coins went from Asia Minor, eventually arrived a few hundred years later on the Mediterranean coast in the southern Levant, and eventually evolved. But it is important to remember that this was a coinage that arose not on its own. Judea and the Holy Land and the biblical land area, coins didn't just pop up there like dandelions after a spring rain. They evolved there with information and knowledge and use of money and coins flowing in from the ancient world into this Mediterranean crossroads. And there was a time in the 3rd century BCE, the 2nd century BCE, where any transaction could have been partially coined money and partially hack silver, cut coins, scrap precious metal, even bronze, even though bronze is sort of the least precious of the metals. We know, for example, that bronze, when it was struck as coin in the 1st, 2nd century BC to CE, when bronze was struck as coin, it had one value in this area. But if you had a piece of bronze that was not struck with the name or the image of the ruler at the time, it was worth a totally different amount. It was worth less. It was only worth the value of the metal, the scrap metal. So there's this, I think the name for it is seigniorage, where there's a value, it's a fiduciary value, where the coin is worth more than the metal. And that was very useful and had to be, by the way, couldn't be proclaimed by a monarch. It had to be accepted by the marketplace. If something stupid was put out into the market wouldn't accept it. So the market accepted a certain amount of coins. And by the way, in the ancient Middle East, and also in other parts of the ancient world, when the market ran out of bronze coins, people took it upon themselves, merchants, local jewelers took it upon themselves to make more bronze coins, which they made a small profit on, and they threw into circulation. A lot of your listeners know about those. They've heard of Civil War tokens or Condor tokens in Canada. And in ancient Judea, we have up to 7% of the small bronze coin denominations were locally made irregular coins that weren't part of the original regular minting. But archaeology tells us that those coins were fully accepted. You see, if we would have found a little container filled only with the irregular coins, or if we found big excavations where there were no irregular coins, only the normal mint coins, then we would say, well, they're something different. But they're always intermingled. They're always intermingled and never separated. So we know they were used, even though they probably were not made by an official government mint.
Really, that's really interesting. As far as there's a lot of obviously novice collectors out there, and they like to, there's a lot of new collectors collecting biblical coins, and the tribute penny of Tiberius is very popular. The widow's mite is always very popular. I remember hearing you once talk about the fact that there's only been one Tiberius denarius found in Israel. And is our standard thinking of the tribute penny and the widow's mite with the wheel and with the star and anchor, which obviously Alexander Jannaeus, who issued that coin, issued lots of other prutas, and it could have been any of those coins as the widow's mite. I think
it's fair to say. Yeah, I think it's fair to say that we really don't have much of an idea at all what those coins were that were mentioned in the Bible. And I'll just take the two examples that you mentioned, Aaron. So the first example is the tribute penny. So we know the story. I'm just going to turn to the right page because I want to quote it correctly. But the coin was given to Jesus, and as it's reported in Mark 12. And the question was, is it lawful to give tribute to Caesar or not? Shall we give or shall we not give? And then the answer is, bring me a penny. Now, this is in the King James translation. Bring me a penny that I may see it. And they brought it, and he said unto them, whose is this image and superscription? And they said unto him, Caesar's. And Jesus answered and said unto them, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God. Well, we know that the original Greek refers to a dram or a denarius. But what we also know is that this story took place sometime during the life of Jesus. That means that it took place sometime between approximately 4 BCE, when we think that Jesus was born, and approximately 30 CE or AD, when Jesus died. So sometime in that period of time, this tribute penny story happened. So they said that the story didn't get written down immediately, but what did happen was that somebody told the story to somebody else, and then somebody told the story to somebody else, and then people started telling the story in gatherings, and it was an interesting story because it had a very interesting key line. Give to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and give to God the things that are God's. Mm-hmm. That was the issue. The question wasn't, what coin is this? Now, the New Testament itself wasn't written down for probably 200 years after this event. Now, let me just say, here we are in 2022. So if we go back 100 years, we're at 1922. And if you go back 200 years, we're at 1822. That's not so far from the time that Washington crossed the Delaware. It's 50 years later. But so how specific do we know about Washington crossing the Delaware? I mean, what you're talking about when you tell a story 200 years after the event happened is that there are changes, exaggerations, people forget things, people don't remember the name of the coin that was used, so they say it was a dram. So the issue is, as Aaron said, there are very few, one or two denarius tribute penny types of Tiberius that have been found in archaeological excavations in Israel. They don't show up on the market there. Over the years, the few times that I've seen them showing up on the market in Israel, by the way, is when there was a hoard that appeared someplace else in Europe somewhere, and all of a sudden somebody exported 50 coins to Israel, and they were able to sell them for a higher price because they had the biblical story. But, most of those coins were struck in Lugdunum, which is in European Gallic areas in what's now France. And Danny Sion, who is the just retired scientific head of the Israel Antiquities Authority, has written that he believes that it's much more likely that the coin involved in that transaction was some kind of a bronze coin. Because bronze coins with images and names of Caesar were quite common in that time and place, while the silver coins just weren't. We can't rule it out. It could have been a denarius. It could have been a drachma. It could have been from an earlier king, but we just don't know. And it's the same thing with the widow's mite. So there came a poor widow. Jesus was sitting observing the people coming into the temple, and there came a poor widow, and she threw in 2 mites, which make a farthing, and it really wasn't very much for her. It really wasn't very much for most people, but for her it was a large amount because it was everything that she had. And Jesus was explaining what charity means. Charity means when you're very poor, you give what you have, and then that's charity. So what do we know about the coin? Well, we know about when this happened. Again, it happened during the lifetime of Jesus, so somewhere in the 10s or 20s CE, when Jesus was past his teenage years. And if he did observe it, so if there was a woman and she was very poor and she came into the temple and she wanted to throw in some money, and she threw in the 2 smallest coins that she had, and they were the smallest coins that were circulating at the time. Well, Alexander Jannaeus struck those tiny little coins, and by the way, his successors, he started with the anchor star, the larger coins, and then they kept being struck from late in his reign right down to the time, apparently around 40 BC, when the last of his immediate family was ruling, and one of his relatives, Mattathias Antigonus, was king for 3 years, while Herod had also been proclaimed king in Rome, and they were battling it out. But there is no doubt that this small change continued to circulate. So, as Aaron says, the widow's mite could be any piece of small change that was in circulation in ancient Judea at the time. It could have been a small coin of Herod the Great. It could have been a small coin of the Maccabees. It could have even been a small Seleucid coin, which also circulated in the area. If you want to go for the best bet, and I think that's what most people do, what was the most common coin, small bronze coin circulating in the area at that time? It was either a small coin of Herod the Great or one of the small coins of Alexander Jannaeus and his successors. But, it's the same thing, the coin in the fish's mouth. We don't know much about. The 30 pieces of silver, I think we can make a pretty good assumption that those were shekels of fire, because that was definitely the standard of big currency in Judea at the time.
Yeah, I think it's
otherwise we don't know.
People to put a specific type on a story instead of having it general.
Absolutely,
which probably could have been anything.
Well,
absolutely, and by the way, I explained this in the book. One of the really interesting things. So, with regard to the tribute penny, a lot of this was confused because when the King James version of the Bible was translated and published, they took the word dinar and they turned it into the word penny, because there were pennies used in England at the time that the King James version was written. And actually, my colleague at the ANS, Oliver Hoover, has written some articles, many of which I quote in my book, where he talks about how the names of these coins were mangled. Even the mite. I mean, the mite was I believe, a Dutch coin and has nothing to do with anything ancient. So, we have a lot of confusion based on early translations as well.
It continues on a different subject, which is almost a little bit more. There's been a lot of debate, and I'm switching gears a little bit, over the year 5 shekel and the Baldwin specimen. Whether they're good or not. I know there was been a movement within the more strict Jewish collectors who don't necessarily think it's correct. Can you explain a little bit about your thinking behind them?
Well, I can tell you the basic story, and I can tell you what I know, and that is that there were probably there are 14 or 15 or 16 shekels of the year 5 that exist. In addition to that, some 20 or 25 years ago, more or less, one of the British dealers was going through coins in the vault at Baldwin's, which contained material literally that went back 100 years at that time. And they found this small bag of shekels. I don't remember the exact number, Aaron. Let's say there were 8 or 10 or 11 that were all from the same dye pair, and they were all cleaned fully. None of them had any incrustations remaining, but weight and examination showed them to be very convincing. And sure enough, it was quickly discovered that the year 5 shekel in the British Museum collection that was acquired in the late 1800s and apparently has not been fully cleaned, has silver chloride covering one side. Apparently, those coins are from the same dyes. So one could say, well, if the British Museum coin is genuine, then all of the Baldwin coins should be genuine. And in fact, the British Museum did testing, X-ray diffraction or X-ray fluorescence. I'm not sure which one, but they did metallurgic testing on the coins, not only on their own coin, but on a couple of the Baldwin coins. And their report states that they see no reason why the coins are not ancient. However, they look a little bit different. They have an irregular look to them. In my book, by the way, I also show irregular shekels from the first year and the fourth year together with this irregular shekel of the fifth year. Today, there are people who believe that this group of Baldwin shekels, which, by the way, they're all from the same dyes, but they're all different stripes. Right? Everyone's centered in a slightly different way. Everyone weighs a slightly different amount. They are made of the same consistently pure silver that the Jewish war shekels are made from. There is some belief, however, that somebody in the 1800s might have used the British Museum example and created a set of contact dyes and manufactured those coins. If they did them very, very cleverly. The truth of the matter is that at this time, I honestly can't say what the truth is. The way I handled it in the book, Aaron, in the new edition was, I said, there's a year 5 shekel, and then there's an A variety, and that's the year 5 shekel that's in the British Museum. And then there's a B variety, and that's the other group of the Baldwin shekels. By the way, the market and the dealers are not totally convinced that they're fake, which is probably appropriate. They're, as I say, they're very confusing coins. They trade at a price much higher than a forgery should trade at, but much lower than a year 5 shekel that's not from this group sells for. And I just want to call your attention to one thing, Aaron, and that's the year 4 quarter shekel. There was also a year 4 quarter shekel in the British Museum made out of silver that was unique. It had 3 ears of wheat or grain on one side, and on the other side it has the letter Daled for 4 inside of the wreath. For many years, that was a unique coin, and for many years, a lot of the experts argued about whether or not it was genuine. And then at a certain point, sometime around 20 years ago, give or take, a hoard of shekels was apparently found in what was ancient Judea, and in that hoard of shekels were at least 2 and maybe 3 examples of that year 4 quarter shekel, which for the first time proved that the British Museum coin was, after all, genuine. So nobody has ever found one of these style of year 5 shekels in an excavation or even in the coin market in an unclean state. So we really have to wait and see. We can't know everything. And the other thing that I like to say all the time is not only do we not know everything, but we retroactively can't understand everything. We like to be able to say they used coins because of this, they paid their taxes in this way, the money meant this, they paid here and they got their change. This is how the money changers work. We have very little actual data. We really do. And there's a lot of anachronistic views, things that we know today that we attribute to our knowledge of 2,000 years ago. And by the way, if you look at things that were written about ancient coins 100 years ago, you will see that very often those scholars also made anachronistic assumptions that were later shown to be not quite so accurate. So I always urge people, don't make up your mind based on what you know, but make up your mind based on the way things might have happened at a time that you're just not familiar with.
Right. Yeah. It's like, that's the beauty of ancient coins is that you never stop learning, and there's always something new, and never
absolutely
finish.
Right.
And the entire
absolutely right.
And the entire endeavor is it circles around something that you're unfamiliar with. So yes, as David was saying, you go back and think about things from a time that is completely foreign to us when things were done in a completely different way, and you really do kind of have to step outside of yourself in order to picture a lot of it happening.
Yeah.
Yep. And so, and as I say, also, look, I am not a very religious person. The people in my family are more religious than I am, less religious than I am. But when I look at the holy books of the Old Testament or the New Testament or some of the things that are, holy to one group and not another group, I prefer to look at these things as historical documents. Now, are they exact, literate, and precise history? No, by definition, they're not. Because, as I said, the New Testament was only written down a couple of hundred years after things happened, after being told orally and stories changing little by little. The Old Testament expanded in even longer time. So we have to take what we deem to be accurate information, and we also have to look at what we deem to be information that may have been changed, simplified, or modified, and do our best to piece it together. But it's not as easy as people sometimes think. It's not as obvious as some people would try to make it.
Yeah. Well, David, I've known you a long time, and the new book's amazing. And I haven't gotten into complete all of it, but I keep it. It's probably one of the only books in my entire library that I keep right next to me for a quick reference all the time. So I appreciate you doing what you've done for numismatics, and you've been a great friend as well. So thank you.
My pleasure. And by the way, speaking of that, I don't know if you noticed this here, and it took me a while to notice it, but the new edition actually has two. This is the first time in my book. It has two of those like black ribbons that are attached to the top of the binding that you can move to any place in the book that you want. So if you like to go to the concordance, you can put that ribbon right into the concordance, and the next time you open it, you can open it to the exact page. Which, it's not really a big thing, but I find it very helpful.
But not one, but two.
But two, right?
Two,
exactly.
That's right. You can mark more than one place in the book. So, so the name of the book is Guide to Biblical Coins. This is the 6th edition. David Hendon. This is available on at most of your coin dealers. You can pick it up at your local coin shop. You can pick it up at many websites, including ours at hjbltd.com. You search for the book. We have a title to it on our homepage. Or you can go to the American Numismatic Society website at numismatics.com. David,
numismatics.org.
Numismatics.org. I'm sorry. I did. Yeah. Don't want to send them to the .com people. So David, thank you so much for joining us. It's really been a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Mike and Aaron. And I'll see you guys soon.
Thank you so much.
Take care of yourself. Thank you.
David.
Bye-bye.
Wow. That was very good and very nice of David to come on. Really, really enjoyed having him on and enjoyed learning about his book, reading it. I really liked it. But that
David's
leads
amazing.
us.
He's amazing.
He is an amazing guy, and that's an amazing book. But that brings us to our Pearl of Wisdom for the week. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to paraphrase your Pearl of Wisdom, but go ahead and share it with us.
So, in numismatics, there is no one book that covers everything. You can't cover over 1,800 years of coin production in one book. You just can't. Our library has literally thousands of reference books, and there's one good book for each area. Sometimes there's several books.
Yeah, I was going to say, sometimes one's not enough.
Right. And so my Pearl of Wisdom is that there is a specific numismatic book for everything. And if you think you can cover it with one book, you are sadly mistaken.
Wow. So nothing comes easy in the world of research. There is always going to be more than one source. There should be more than one source. You should be able to verify everything anyway. So, do your homework, find more than one source. And, libraries are probably, I think, the building blocks of real numismatic knowledge, right? When I look at shops that I walk into, little brick and mortars and stuff like that, you can pretty much tell what kind of a person you've got that you're dealing with when you look behind their counter and you look at their books.
Right.
It's that simple.
And, people always ask me which book should I get, when they first start. And I always tell them,
all of them.
What area? Well, no. I usually say, what area do you want to collect? And they say, I don't know. I said, well, then you shouldn't be buying any books yet. When you figure out what area you want to collect, then you start to focus on the books that will help you enlarge your knowledge of that specific area. And there are coins and there are coin books for that. My dad's book is always great for the 100 greatest because it covers everything. Sure. It's only $30. But beyond that, you're going to have to spend some real money to get the proper books. Like if you collect Alexander the Great, you have to have Martin Price's book. Well, that's out of print. Most of these types of books are out of print. So you're looking at $300 to $400. So I'm not going to tell somebody to go out and spend $300 or $400 until they know that they want to collect Alexander the Great and that's where they want to focus.
No, that's absolutely true. I mean, you can waste as much money as you want in putting together a library and really not get anything out of it if you're not putting your tuition towards what it is that you're interested in. So
right.
Yeah.
I mean, we're dealers. We have to have every reference book because we can't trust every attribution that comes in our door based on the way somebody wrote it up. We have to recatalog it to make sure that it was done properly. We've talked about this.
Yeah.
And so it's our responsibility to our clients to have every book. And that doesn't mean that every collector has to have every book, but they should have the books that they want to focus in the areas that they want to collect.
Well, and this isn't to blow, the HJB horn, right? But I mean, beyond that, we've got Curtis and we've got your dad. It's, I mean, there are still more things, more sources that you could check, and still yet more, knowledge to be tapped.
Right.
Yeah. So
that was a great show, Mike.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Really, I really liked having David on. There is a lot of information in that book. If you get an opportunity, pick it up. You can do it at Amazon.com. You can pick it up at the ANS website at numismatics.org. Let's get that right. If you're an ANS member, you can actually get a 30% discount. But it's Guide to Biblical Coins, 6th edition by David Hendon. Thank you to him for showing up and blessing our show with his numismatic knowledge. I learned a lot, even though I feel dumb every time I learn something. You know what I mean? There's just so much. It's like drinking from a fire hose sometimes.
We never stop learning.
No. And hopefully we never will. So thank you to everybody who helped contribute to the show, who helped with our Facebook page and all the stuff. You can catch us at hjbltd.com. If you want to talk to Aaron, if you want to write to him, he's Aaron at HJBLTD. I'm Mike N at HJBLTD.com. You got anything else for him, Aaron?
No, I'm good.
All right. Well, thanks to all of you who listened. We really appreciate you. And we will see you next time on the next edition of the Ancient Coin Podcast with Aaron Berk.
Thanks for listening to the Ancient Coin Podcast with Aaron Berk. We'll return with another episode soon. Meantime, you can join our private group on Facebook. Just go to facebook.com and search the Groups tab for Ancient Coin Podcast Discussion Group and ask to join. There you can become part of our community, where we share and discuss ancient coins, as well as the show, the ancient coin market, auctions, or just to give our own opinions on things in order to learn together. Join Aaron and Mike again soon for the next episode of the Ancient Coin Podcast with Aaron Berk.